Hi everyone, my name's Jill and I'm a transformational coach working with introverted professional women who are looking to build on their self-confidence, quieten down that negative self-talk and also who want to prevent overwhelm. So I thought I'd just jump on today and talk to you a little bit about self-doubt because it's something that everyone goes through at different times. And I thought that I'd just talk a little bit about what it is, where it comes from. And actually, if you make sure you hang on till the end, because I'll be talking about some of the traps of self-doubt and how to overcome those. So self-doubt, as I said, is something we all get. And, it's that nagging negative self-talk, the ones where I'm not good enough, no one's going to listen to me, I just can't do that, I'm going to fail, I'm going to get it wrong, I'm going to look silly. And this tends to happen when we feel quite vulnerable, when we're put into new or different situations, and when we're just generally trying something new. Now, these thoughts are a self-protection mechanism. And it's where our brains are actually protecting us from uncertainty, from failure, from embarrassment, and from heartbreak. And it does this by keeping us in our heads, making us overthink things rather than taking that action that we need to take. And inevitably, by not taking that action, it's actually holding us back in our career and in our life. So it's a hesitation avoidance mechanism, and it's generally driven by fear. And it tends to start with that immediate resistance. Just wait a minute. What could go wrong here? Now, the good news is that these instincts are completely normal. And they stem from primitive times where our ancestors were being hunted by wild animals. Now, obviously, this instinct kept them alive. And although we're, not having those same problems today, we're not being hunted by saber-toothed tigers, our brains are still wired to avoid uncertainty, and it actually can't differentiate between a physical threat and an emotional threat. So our brain responds in a similar way to either situation. So how do we kind of overcome this self-doubt? We need to first understand, what our brain is doing when it's hesitating. And then we need to catch it in the act and change how we respond to it by rewiring our brains so that we take action. So, and we also need to understand it's like a resistance avoidance mechanism. So it's just a thought which is then followed by inaction. So if you think about this negative self-doubt as a loop almost, so you'll be put in this new situation, your brain will obviously immediately say, wait a minute, what could go wrong? And it keeps you in your head overthinking things, and so you don't take that action. Then the fact that you didn't take that action leads you to then believing that actually you can't take action. And because then you didn't take action, you didn't get a successful outcome in whatever it was that you wanted to do, which then fuels that thought of, well, I'm not successful, I didn't manage to do it, and therefore I can't do it. So then when you're put into a similar situation again, your brain's going to remember that and straight away be like, I can't do this, I couldn't do it last time, I didn't do it, and so I'm going to fail. Now, there are four main traps of self-doubt, and it's really important for you to try to determine which one of these you spend most of your time so that you can then understand how you can overcome it. So the first trap is hesitation. Now, this is triggered by uncertainty, and it might look like waiting, overthinking, or perfectionism. So you might see yourself saying to yourself, hang on a minute, what could go wrong? You're telling yourself stories about what could go wrong. You might keep yourself busy with other things and procrastinating. You might avoid putting work out there until it's completely perfect because you don't want anyone else to see it and you don't want to be judged on it. Or you might be someone who makes a plan but then doesn't actually act on it. So if this does sound like you, the first thing you need to do is to identify what hesitating looks like for you. So what are you doing when you're hesitating, rather than doing what you should be doing? Then you need to think about, what do you actually tell yourself when you're hesitating? And then once you know the answers to these questions, you can break down your goals into smaller steps and actually focus on just that next small step rather than getting overwhelmed by the big picture. Now, the next trap is hiding. And this is like a fear of others, or feeling very overwhelmed. And this kind of characterizes itself as avoiding mechanism. You are procrastinating and doing other things rather than doing what you should be doing. Or you're kind of shrinking back and playing it quite safe. So you tend to get overwhelmed by the bigger picture rather than looking at how to get to that picture. So what that tends to then happen is that you become paralyzed and you don't take any action. You do nothing because you don't know where to start. You might be someone who actively holds yourself back from new opportunities, from doing new things, because you might be afraid of being judged or from looking silly if you get it wrong. So if this sounds like you need to identify actually what you're afraid of. What is that fear? Because then you can try to minimize that fear. So in what areas do you hide or procrastinate? And what are you doing when you're procrastinating? So what are you doing instead of doing that one thing that you should do? And then you need to identify what that big goal is. What is it that you want? And then break that down into the smaller manageable steps. Because if you focus on the next step that you need to take and keep focusing on the next step, eventually you will get to that bigger picture. But if you just fixate on the bigger picture, you become overwhelmed and you do nothing. So the next one is hypercritical. Now, this is a fear of being hurt or disappointed, or being like a fear of failing at something. So you might argue against yourself, in conflict with yourself. You'll be very self-critical and focusing on your flaws and on what could go wrong rather than, actually, what am I good at? What's going to go right here? What can I, focusing on getting things right. You might be someone who knows what they need to do, but actually has lots of excuses and doesn't take that action. So if this sounds like you need to kind of identify what excuses you use to hold yourself back. What are you afraid that's going to happen? And then once you know what you're afraid of, how can you eliminate this obstacle? How can you eliminate this fear? And then make a decision to commit, almost to prove yourself wrong. So you've got this idea of the worst thing that's going to happen, but actually commit to giving it a go to prove yourself that this terrible thing didn't happen after all. And the fourth one is helplessness. So this is an insecurity and like a fear of success. So you might be someone who tends to play the victim. You might blame others when something goes wrong. You might have a real lack of self-trust. And So therefore, you might be someone who constantly believes that nothing goes your way, and you can become quite overly dependent on other people. Now, if this sounds like you, you need to first identify in what areas you feel helpless, and then what beliefs you have that support that feeling of being helpless in those areas. Then you can identify sort of who you're dependent on and why you're dependent on them, and what you're afraid of happening. If you don't take your own responsibility, why don't you do that? What are you afraid is going to happen? Then you need to kind of show yourself that actually you are capable of taking responsibility for yourself. Look at past experiences. In what areas are you confident in taking responsibility for yourself, and utilize those experiences towards the areas where you're feeling less confident. And then have a little think about, how does sort of playing this victim serve you in life? What is it stopping you from doing? And how could you rectify it to, what are the benefits of you not having this belief anymore? And then you need to really sort of build in some self-love. So what do you enjoy doing? Just trying to build that into your day or into your week. And then having some smaller goals to work towards. Because again, thinking of that bigger picture is too big. You need to just focus on little small steps that are going to take you to where you want to be. And actually each time then you're successful in taking one of those steps is to, celebrate your progress, because that imprints in your brain and then will help you to keep that momentum and continue. So I hope you found this helpful, and has given you a few tips and of where you might tend to fall into the self-doubt trap and how you can kind of look to overcome those. Thank you very much for listening. I know it was quite a long video this time. Please keep an eye out for more videos that I'll be doing. And if you like this one, please like and subscribe to my channel. Thank you very much.